My 34 close friend, 37 of 15 years, just moved out to New Zealand to work with me at my new restaurant. He has been here for 3 weeks, but his behaviour is so toxic I can't stand to be around him. So, a very quick backstory. I moved to this from the US about 4 years ago. Life is going pretty swell for me out here as a chef. I've just recently married a Kiwi woman, crushed the gym on the daily, and just landed a great job setting up a new restaurant in a hotel. The person in question is an old friend of mine from back home. He had worked for me at a different restaurant I ran years ago. I should note, when I left him 4 years ago, he was sober and had his shit together. Important later. Anyway, he had just recently decided to move out to Australia, of which he is a citizen, but really wasn't enjoying. So I asked him if he wanted to hop the pond and come help me set up the new place. I personally was really excited. So fast forward to today. He's been in for 3 weeks. He is working the breakfast shift at the hotel, because the restaurant is still being built. He was so eager to get started, see the city, and hang out, but his behaviour in the short time he's been here has been extremely cringe-worthy and toxic. It's to the point that I don't want to spend any time with him, and I am not sure if he will work well with my team I am building at the restaurant. I'm not really sure where to start, so I guess I'll just start listing things off for your consideration. He's been drinking a lot. Drinking culture is pretty full on in. This guy has been getting completely sloshed every day. I invited him over for dinner last week. He shows up so drunk he can barely stand up straight. I left him in the living room with my wife so they could catch up while I made dinner. At one point I walk out and he's trying to awkwardly give her a back rub. She gets up and moves away. He gets a little offended and says he was just trying to do something nice for her. But we just assume it's because he's drunk and tell him to calm down, laugh it off and move on. As the conversation continues, it just gets worse and worse. Eventually, he just begins saying completely insane things. He leans over to her and says, "Have you ever had to kill someone? Because it changes you forever." At this point, I was pretty done, so I leaned in and told her not to worry. He hadn't killed anyone. He was just being silly. He got up and angrily stormed out. The next day I called to make sure. He got home okay. He apologized for his behaviour. I told him I forgave him, but made it very clear he was not to touch my wife without her permission ever again. He's been pretty creepy towards women the entire time he's been here. His go-to move is flirting with someone who is paid to be nice to him, like the checkout girl at the supermarket, the room service girl at his hotel, or a bartender. Not sure how Reddit feels about it, but that's a huge no for me. Flirting with someone who has to be polite is essentially trapping them in an awkward position there is no easy way out of. It's even worse when he is clearly intoxicated. I have not properly called him out on it just yet, but I've casually mentioned how cringe it is a few times, only to be met with the typical tagline of single and ready to mingle. All the women who work with us are all very aware of this already. He is constantly greeting them with, "Hey gorgeous, how are you beautiful?" along with plenty of inappropriate, that is what she say type joke. He's honestly under the impression he's being charming. It went really well for a couple of hours. We were all having great conversation and feeling good. But at a certain point, he started getting a bit too flirty. He kept scooting his barstool closer and closer to one of their female coworkers, and she in turn kept scooting away. Eventually she called him out on it and asked him to back up. After that he was sullen and angry the rest of the evening. He kept trying to interrupt the conversation and change the subject. Eventually he just stood up and stormed off angrily. I assured everyone that it was not anything they had done, and that he was just being sensitive and emotional. I called him later that night, and he told me he was pissed off, lonely, and homesick. I told him he should consider not drinking so much. The next day after he didn't show up for work because he was hungover, I told him not to engage in flirtations with the hotel staff. About 5 separate times, each time slightly more intense than the last. He has expressed displeasure with working the breakfast shift. I give him the same straightforward answer every time, but he continually brings it up. He also is unhappy with what he is being paid. I told him he wants more, he has to prove himself first. I can only vouch for him so much. If he wants the company to approve paying him more, he has to prove that he's unexpendable. Every time he gets a little drunk, it comes up. I can sort of understand his displeasure, but at the same time the ball has really been in his court from the start. I didn't draft his contract. My boss did that. He was sent a contract to consider. It was up to him to send it back, asking for different terms and higher pay. Even now, he keeps bothering me about it. But he should really go and talk to my boss if he's that upset about it. But I think he'd prefer to try and get me to do that for him. So I had a sit-down with him yesterday. I tried to have a heart-to-heart with him about his drinking and how he knows that it brings out toxic characteristics. I tried using examples of guys we know back home who are our age but are still living off past memories and refusing to grow up. How they're now the toxic friends no one wants to be around. He told me he is working through it, but also said he had been storming off in the other two stories because it was better than getting in my face. I have interpreted this as a threat, and also that he doesn't believe he in the wrong in any way. So that is where I have left it for the time being. Honestly, it doesn't look good. Everything is right on the cusp of me having to shut him down personally and professionally. Just wondering if anyone had some advice for me. Maybe there is a better way of getting through to him without scrapping the friendship. Too long, don't red old friend came to work with me in. His personal and professional behaviour has been so flagrantly toxic and creepy. I now don't know how to deal with him. Edit. Alright, I need to address this so I don't have to keep explaining it in the comments. I can't just fire him. The labour laws in us and his are different than the us. Workers have rights and contracts. You need to establish a chain of misconduct through verbal warnings, write-ups, etc. And his blatant sexual harassment or assault will be a deal breaker, but hey beautiful doesn't count as serious harassment or assault. If he gets enough complaints, it does, but as of yet no one has complained. You all are getting the footnotes. For the most part he is professional and polite at work. I've just noticed some off-colour comments or jokes that I deem as inappropriate and indicators of possible abuse. Edit. I'm going to need to address this because it's getting a little messy in the comments section. I am here for professional advice. It's appreciated, but not needed. I know how to handle my professional business. Also, while it's true that he's been working for the company for 3 weeks, I've only been there for 1. Every saying to fire him outright doesn't know how the laws work, but also doesn't understand how workplaces in general work. Saying hey beautiful may be crossing a line, but not everyone will be offended by it. For the time being, everyone at work likes him. His behaviour thus far is only an indicator of abuse, not a fireable offence, and not necessarily sexual in nature. However, I did already tell him it. Not acceptable, and that I would like him to stop. To everyone saying he blatantly hit on my wife, and I did nothing. Again, yes, he crossed the line, and I called him out on it. But neither I or my wife registered it as flirtation. It's easy for all of you to sit across from your screens and judge, but you weren't there. If a close personal friend of yours suddenly did something out of the blue that was uncool, you wouldn't immediately cut them out of your life. You'd probably assume they made a mistake or that you misread the action. He's naturally a very physical guy. He tries to rub my shoulder constantly. What I want is for someone to look at his behaviour and tell me if they recognise it from experiences in their own life, and tell me if there is a way I can break through to him, rather than killing the friendship. You have to be an absolutely miserable fuck if you ask every single friend who behaves badly some of the time. If you're never willing to try and reason with people, how is anyone ever going to improve? To everyone saying I'm ignoring and making excuses for his behaviour and exacerbating rape culture, please do kindly fuck off and take your negative energy with you. I am specifically here because I have a huge problem with his behaviour and do not intend to tolerate. Your friendship got him the opportunity, but professionalism is what he needs to get what he wants professionally. What he needs to hear is that your friendship is of little consequence to the people he works for, the people who work for him, or the patron. If he's not a stand-up, he knows this. The ball is in his court. He either sets out to be the guy he knows he needs to be, or he loses the opportunity and ultimately the friendship. When friends stick their necks out and get nothing back, there's no friendship left. Okay, so I am a raging alcoholic in the beginning stages of recovery. The short answer is there is nothing you can do until he recognizes there is a problem. And here's the thing, he knows there is a problem. But addicts are incredible liars, especially to ourselves. So not only is he lying to you when he says he's working through it, he also has himself convinced of it. What you can do is to force him to face the consequences of his actions. Show up to a dinner party shit-faced, no longer allowed at the party. Being inappropriate at happy hour with coworkers, no longer invited to hang out. And it's very important that when he asks why he isn't invited, you bluntly tell him. Ultimately, it takes most of us hitting rock bottom, losing our jobs, family, and friends and all respect anyone ever had for us before we are willing to really face and fix the problems we have created. So it's honestly likely you will lose this friendship for a while. However, if / when he does get sober, he will come back. And it's important to support his sobriety if you wish to continue the relationship. I'm not sure how close you guys are, but you can also offer to go to or with him. Help him set up a doctor's appointment. There are 2 different types of anti-drinking men. One basically blocks the feel-good receptors so you don't get that happy feeling from alcohol, and the other basically makes you have an allergic reaction to alcohol and research outpatient rehabs, or inpatient if you feel it is warranted. Ultimately, it's up to you how involved you want to get. But make sure to have good boundaries. Addicts are like drowning people. They're struggling and may try to bring down anyone who tries to help them. I hope this helps you even a little bit. I wish you and your friend the best of luck. I mean, your first obligation is to protect your staff, wife, and the other vulnerable people around you. I am a service industry veteran, a pastry chef, so I've dealt with guys like this way too many times. The places I stayed are the places where my chief stood up for me and made it clear that behaviour would not be tolerated. At the end of the day, his bad behaviour reflects directly back onto you since you're the one recommending him. I would heavily reconsider if you want to stay in his corner. I am not insensitive to people's struggles, but you also need to put yourself and the people you care about first. This guy is acting like garbage right now, and it needs to be shut down before something goes seriously awry. Service industry is notorious for letting this kind of stuff slide, and I plus many women I know have left jobs for what this guy is doing. I would suggest that you take a hard stance, and if he pushes back or continues the behaviour, it may be time to reconsider his employment and your friendship.